We start off with some legal news. I know that's too sexy for the audience to start off right off the bat with, but it's important. The Supreme Court has batted down the major challenge to HISA and its constitutionality. I'm reading from the PBS story here. PBS covering racing. You love to see it. Supreme Court on Monday rejected a challenge from Republican-controlled states to a horse racing safety law that has led to national medication and anti-doping rules. The judges left in place an appeals court ruling that upheld the law and rejected claims that Congress gave too much power to HISA, the private entity that administers the rules. So this is not the end. The Fifth Circuit still could rule against HISA, and then maybe it would go up the chain again. I'm a legal scholar. Thankfully, Lisa Lazarus and several people on the HISA executive group are. But there's some quotes in here that I really want to read, just because, it's Chuck Sheeler, who is one of the big wigs at HISA, the chairman of the board of directors, said it's long past time for opponents of HISA to drop their outstanding lawsuits. In light of this decision, continued litigation only serves to take time and valuable resources away from our core mission of improving the safety and integrity of thoroughbred racing. Now listen to what Eric Hamelbeck, the CEO of the HBPA, said. I've said all along that we're going to do our due diligence all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to ensure that the rules governing horsemen are fair, clear, and constitutional. He also went on to say, we could still hear any day from the Fifth Circuit on whether HISA remains unconstitutional after the congressional tweak, and the oral argument last October went well for us. It went well for them. If you listen to the people in HISA who talk about their goals for the industry, it's about the safety and the integrity of the sport. When you listen to guys like Eric Hamelbeck talk, it's all about what's good for me. What's good for me and my brethren in the HBPA. It's not about the horses. And to me, that's where the split is yawning. Because, and I've seen this being on the HISA Next Gen group, and John, I'm sure you've seen it as well, being on the Horsemen's group. Nobody is in this just because they want a title or they want a fat salary or anything. You listen to these people talk, especially the young people that I'm on the board with. Everybody has the best interests of the horse and the industry at heart. And I'm just so tired of the arrow slinging. It's time to move on. It's time to get behind this because, again, I've said this before, you've had years and years and years to come up with a satisfactory alternative. You haven't done it. The Supreme Court, even the Republican-controlled Supreme Court, has now told you to go piss up a river. Let it go.
Yeah, I think that's a legal jargon, isn't go piss in the wind, go piss up the river.
I don't even know if that's a phrase, but I like that.
but Joe, I think the important takeaway from this, aside from what you said, which is personal interest over the betterment of the sport, okay, is that basically the Supreme Court came in and they said lower court's decision was fair. We're not going to hear this on appeal, and that we think that HISA now is constitutional. Now, that wasn't originally the ruling. Originally, the ruling in the Fifth Circuit, I believe, all these circuits just bog my head down. But anyway, in one of the circuits, they basically said, nope, you guys have too much power and it's not in balance. So they came back with a different set of changes. And now the Supreme Court is saying, okay, you are constitutional now. We are not going to hear any other appeals from the Sixth Circuit. Fifth Circuit, which represents New Orleans, and I had it all written down. I can't find my notes, guys. Darn it. Anyway, but basically, it's like the states that aren't following the HISA rules are still appealing. And also, Joe, it's like a couple of states and a standardbred group and a quarter horse group, which I don't know how they got kind of, cobbled into it, other than maybe they're paying some additional fees and that's why they're being included. But either as it may, I'm not a lawyer, but it looks to me like everything's in order. HISA is the law of the land now, and either you're going to follow by those rules or get out of the way because you're not going to be part of our sport anymore. And quite frankly, from a personal standpoint, either way is fine. But stop wasting everyone's time and money. And as a former card-carrying member of the HBPA, we've paid dues over the years and everything like that because they were representing horsemen. And I think in Eric Hamelbeck's view, he still is representing the 30,000 constituents that are members there. But it's not the way of the land anymore. It's not the rules. It's not what's going to be best for the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about some of the safety and fatality rules, figures that have come out also, and it's showing that things are working. Is it a pain in the ass? Yeah. Additional rules, additional procedures are a pain in the ass, but is it getting the results that we want as an industry? Well, for one thing, we haven't been shut down yet, so that's good. And another thing is that horses are safer right now. Is it coincidence? I don't know. It's only been a year and a half, so I guess technically it could be a coinky dink. I don't think it is. But the main thing is that there's adults in the room. We're trying to get things set. We're trying to move forward. And Joe, you use the piss up a river, comment. I remember Brereton Jones, who was then governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Whenever people would complain to him, he would say, if you think you could play better, put on a uniform and get on the field. Well, stop with all this nonsense of like trying to throw shit in the way of progress. And if you think that you have a better alternative, then speak now or forever hold your peace. Because basically, otherwise, the train's leaving the station and it's moving forward with the HISA rules.
The train has long left the station. That to me is the biggest thing here. It's like as you mentioned, it's been in effect for over a year and a half. Like the drug rules have not been in effect as long, but to try to turn this thing around now, it's just first of all, it's to me it's immoral considering the improved safety numbers that we are seeing. Small sample size or no, we are seeing progress, and it's implausible to be able to turn everything around, send back all the old rules to the way they used to be, and then come up with some other plan and then try to get that approved. Like it's just a completely nonsensical, unserious attempt. And
and Joe, my understanding is that the rules that the other group is trying to promote is like, let's go back to the old rules. Well, the old rules weren't working. And we were on the precipice of extinction based on the old rules. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I mean it's listen. And there's already so many processes and so many moving parts that have been moving for a long time now. And I gotta say, the other thing that annoys me about like the Eric Camelbacks of the world is most of the horsemen that I've spoken to have done everything in their power to get on board and to get up to speed. So I think it's a misrepresentation and makes it look like 30,000 horsemen are railing against this and just refuse to get in line. Most people I've seen have thought that, okay, maybe the rollout was a little bumpy, but the rules are much better and much fairer and create a much more level playing field than we've had before. Even if it's an administrative pain in the ass along the way, this is something that's good for the sport, and we're going to do our best to comply. So I honestly tip my hat to most of the horsemen and the ones at least that I've talked to for really getting behind this thing. And that's the only way it's going to work.
Right.
That's the only way it is working, is to have that kind of unification and to have one or two guys and positions of power still shaking their fist and trying to get it struck down by the courts. Is just unbelievably annoying and disheartening. But thankfully, I think they're going to lose.
Yeah, the good news is that it looks like things are moving in the right direction again.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you mentioned earlier, McKinsey had a presentation at the Jockey Club's Welfare and Safety of the Racehorse Summit, which happened yesterday, June 25th in Lexington. And there were some striking numbers that came out. Obviously we have the fatality data that's been better in the first 3 months of the year, and it's been better year over year since the equine injury database was the advent of the equine injury database in 2009. But the thing that I like about these numbers, and this is something that I've seen on the HISA Next Gen group as well, is being able to stratify the data and being able to break it up and figure out cause and effect, because it's one of the major takeaways from this presentation that is that 50 trainers, which amounts to 0.7% of the trainer base in America. There's trainers with over 1,000 starts from 2018 to 2022. 50 trainers accounted for 13% of all North American fatalities in racing. So the more that we can identify the trainers and breeders too, 50 breeders, and this is breeders with over 500 starts from 2018 to 2022, 50 breeders, which is 0.1% of the breeder population, accounted for 8.4% of North American racing fatalities. So to me, this is the value of the data. It's not just the top line. What are we doing to reduce equine fatalities. How's that progress going? It's to dig deep into that data and say, who are the people who are most routinely putting horses at risk? And we've seen some of that data over the years. In California, we saw that Peter Miller and Bob Baffert's horses broke down at a rate much higher in general than other trainers. But yeah, if we can identify the trainers and the breeders who just aren't doing right by the horses based on the fatality data, we can start to increase the pressure and potentially increase the sanctions on those people. And I just one more point before I toss to you, John. It's in that vein. I noticed on Saturday when I was at Aqueduct, Naira in the scratches was printing the reason for the scratch.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So usually it's just, and this part is only recent implementation as well, is trainer or vet scratches. But that can be, there's sometimes a little give and take where that doesn't really tell you a whole lot. Now we're seeing horses unsound, horse has an illness, horse is injured. And that gets us closer to the Hong Kong Jockey Club type model where the fans, the bettors, and the public knows everything about which horses are running and which horses aren't and why. So this is that's to put a bow on it. This is the kind of progress that the opponents of HISA, I think, are trying to unravel.
Well, and it comes down to transparency, Joe. It comes down to that everyone is trying, not everybody, the majority of this sport is trying to say, we're no longer going to do this in darkness. We're no longer going to try to keep things at arm's length. Like the majority of the world, things are moving forward. People want transparency. They yearn for it there. And quite frankly, if they don't get it, they're going to other places where they can get it in other sports. So I think California and New York are the states that are actually giving that detailed reporting information with regard to scratches, and kudos to them for doing that, because if for no other reason, it just gives the betting public more confidence when horses are running, versus why they were scratched. Were they scratched because they quote unquote had a temperature, or as Joe likes to say, a temperature? Or was it real? Did the horse really have 101 temp and had to be medicated? To go back to what you were saying that I thought was really interesting, and again, this is now that I went on my transparency run, I'll tell you something that, some stats that weren't transparent, and that is in the McKinsey report, they talk about the 50 trainers, 0.7% of all licensed trainers that have started a horse in the past 3 years, represented or accounted for 13% of the fatalities in North America. They don't state the names. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of legal reasons as to why, even though they're just publishing facts. So, I don't see the harm in it. But, again, I'm not an attorney, so maybe I'm not fully understanding the rationale behind it. But there were 50 trainers that represented 13% of all fatalities. That seemed kind of high. And then, as you mentioned, Joe, there were 50 breeders, which represents 0.1% of all registered breeders of thoroughbreds, accounted for 8.4% of the fatalities. And again, no names were exchanged. It's a little harder to extrapolate that information as opposed to trainers because you don't see it quite as often, and you don't really look for breeders when a horse is running. You're usually looking at owner, trainer, jockey, combinations. But I thought it was interesting that McKinsey uses a term, and I don't want to misquote it, but they said, on the bloodstock side, 50 breeders demonstrated a 100% higher risk of fatalities. Those 50, quote unquote, most dangerous breeders accounted for 8.4% of the fatalities from 2018 to 2022. I think, Joe, again, putting on my legal hat that I shouldn't, that you should sue the McKinsey report, because wasn't most dangerous breeder your high school nickname?
John, this was a very serious, studious conversation. You single-handedly derailed there.
Yeah. I had to figure out how to put that together. And, I was like, all right, I'll go on a 3-minute rant. And then when I see Joe's eyes glaze over, I'm going to hit him right between the eyes with the most dangerous.
No kids.
No kids yet.
That I know.
No kids yet. Happy 50th show, Joe.